This conference will now be recorded.
Great. I was making a really weird face when he did that. All right. Welcome to our online forum hosted by the League of Women Voters St. Peter, also in partnership with the St. Peter Herald and the St. Peter Chamber of Commerce. I am so excited to be here. I'm Megan Bennett with the League of Women Voters New Ulm, and I will be serving as your moderator tonight, which is my great honor, and you also have all given me a reason to leave the house and put on pants for the first time in months. Thank you so much. So, I am assisted by a whole host of talented ladies in this room tonight, also with the League of Women Voters. I am very blessed and lucky that our voter service chair, Linda Heine from the League of Women Voters New Ulm, is also here with us, just making sure that she can give me the hook if I say anything too crazy. So that's always good to have somebody on your back. For those of you who don't know, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse candidates. We do have platforms and positions. And if you are curious about the League and you want to learn more, you can check us out on our website at the League of Women Voters Minnesota at lwvmn.org. I encourage you to check us out. We're a great group of ladies and men. That's right, men can join too. So tonight, we're very excited to be joined by the candidates for State Senate District 19B and House District 19A. For those of you watching this recording, thank you so much for being here, and way to take charge of your democracy. Way to make sure that you're an educated voter. I'm proud of you. You can tell your mom or dad if that means anything to them. Some lady you don't know is proud of you. So, this forum was recorded on October 1st, 2020, without a live audience, except for our cat coworkers and dog coworkers that join us frequently these days. Questions were submitted over email prior to this forum from you, the public, by your co-hosts, and by the League of Women Voters St. Peter. We're very excited to go through these, and I'm also excited that we're at the point in the agenda where I get to welcome the candidates. So our candidates are for Senate District 19B, with the GOP, we have Elizabeth Bangert, and with the DFL, we have Nick Frentz. And then our candidates for House District 19A, for the GOP, we have Susan Ackland, and for the DFL, we have Jeff Brandt. Now I'm gonna go over the ground rules. Pay attention, take notes, write these down. I'm only going over them once. So candidates will have 1.5 minutes, 1 minute and 30 seconds for your opening statements. And then on a rotating basis, I will ask each of you questions, and you will each have 2 minutes to answer. At the end of the forum, you'll have another 1.5 minutes where you can offer us closing statements. Now, because of the joy of technology and because we're doing this online, you will see that we have 2 timekeepers with the League of Women Voters St. Peter. We've got Carolyn Dobler and Colleen Jacks. They will hold up a yellow sign when you have 15 seconds left. See that yellow sign right there? And they'll hold up a stop sign when you have no time left. When you have no time left, we will let you finish your sentence, but then if you continue to go on, we will just mute you and you're done talking, and it'll look real crazy on the camera because your mouth will be moving, but no words are coming out of it. So do your best to make sure that you stay on time, or we will make sure that you do. So with that, we're gonna get started. Is everybody ready and excited? I am. I'm super excited. Okay, we're gonna start with our opening statements. We're gonna start with the Senate candidates, and we will start with Elizabeth Bangert.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Bangert, and I am the GOP candidate for Senate 19 in Minnesota, obviously. I am not a politician. I have no political science degree. I'm just an average citizen who spent time up in St. Paul. I'm a child care provider, and I had an unfortunate encounter with the Department of Human Services. It prompted me to compile public data, which showed that there were gross inconsistencies by the licensing agency. And so I spent 2 years in St. Paul trying to advocate for childcare providers and kind of bring those to light. During that time, I learned a lot about government and a lot about our rights. And my goal is to go up and represent the people. Our role and responsibility, in my opinion, is to defend the Constitution, our constitutional republic, And to do so, we are the gatekeepers, so to speak, to ensure that your rights are upheld and that you have the freedoms that were given to you by our Creator, but also when our Constitution was written. So my goal is to do nothing more than protect our God-given rights and restore our constitutional republic as was intended.
All right, wonderful. With a little bit of time to spare. Nick Friends?
Thank you very much, Megan. Thanks, fellow candidates. Thanks to the League of Women Voters. I am one of those men who's a proud member, so I appreciate everybody coming tonight to host the debate. As I've already been introduced, my name is Nick Friends, the very proud senator from the Senate District 19 area, which is Mankato, North Mankato, St. Peter. I live in North Mankato with my wife, Jill, of 32 years, and we have 4 great children. I'm glad that they're all adults, and I'm glad that they've all moved out of the house. I'm especially glad to join you to talk about the Senate District, and the vision for Minnesota. I think it's a great time for our state to be talking about the direction we're going. In the Senate, I serve on the Senate Transportation Committee, the Senate Agriculture Committee, the Senate Long-Term Care and Aging Committee, the Pensions Commission, and the Legislative Audit Commission, where we watch government spending, and I enjoy that. I'm an assistant minority leader and also the chair of our Rural Caucus and the Clean Energy Caucus. Politicians can tell you what they're about and why you should vote for them. I also urge people to consider the endorsements. I'm very proud to be endorsed by Education Minnesota, by the Minnesota Police and Peace Officer Association, by Minnesota Farm Bureau, by the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, by the working men and women at the state hospital, by Conservation Minnesota. I'm looking forward to tonight very much, and I think where we're going is to be together as a state. We have the greatest potential when we do that. Thank you.
Right on time. We're going to move on to House candidates, and we'll start with Susan Ackland. Susan, start over for me if you would, so that way we make sure we hear all of what you're saying.
And actually, you're not moving and Colleen's not moving, so I don't see the signs going up or down on my screen.
Okay.
So anyway, you can stop me. Anyway, my name is Susan, and my friends call me Susie. And I'm just hoping to be the next representative for District 19B. It's condensed a lifetime into what I thought was going to be 2 minutes, but 1.5 minutes, so I'll make it even shorter. But I'm a retired nurse. I've worked in the nursing field for over 40 years. My husband and I have been working in and around the St. Peter area for the last 30 years. So in retirement, I was looking for a passion. I was looking for something to motivate me that I felt really passionate about. Some friends encouraged me to run for office, and I accepted that challenge. I am passionate about America. I love the state of Minnesota. I think that the people of southern Minnesota are just some of the best people in the world. But I also feel like we're at a crossroads where we are too divided. And I think our constituents want us to represent them 100%, regardless of party, and do away with the partisan divide if we can. So I'm running because I feel like I'm a good listener. I'm a good advocate for people. I'm a person of integrity and honesty and forthrightness. I think that I can represent our constituents very well.
Thank you, Susan. All right, we're going to move on to Jeff Brand, opening statement.
Hello, everyone. I'm your District 19A representative. I have been serving you for the past 2 years at the state legislature as your partner in St. Paul. Formerly, I'm a St. Peter City Council member for the past 7 years before I became representative in 2019. I serve on a lot of committees. I have a lot of committee assignments. I'm on the Labor Committee, the Veterans Affairs and Military Families Committee. I'm on the Greater Minnesota Jobs and Economic Development Committee, the Tax Committee, and I'm also Vice Chair of the Agriculture and Food Finance and Policy Committee. I also serve on the Rural Health Advisory Committee and the Subcommittee on Minnesota Waters. Plus, I was appointed by the Speaker of the House to the National Committee for Transportation and Natural Resources, and that's by the National Coalition of State Legislators. I'm a proud father. I'm also a husband. My wife and I have a small business here in St. Peter. We install rain gardens and restore prairies across the state. I've just been a proud person to be at the legislature, smiling from ear to ear to represent you. I think it's really important that we do work together, which has been my motto these past 2 years. It's on all of my campaign signs and literature, working better together. And so I'm proud to serve as your partner, and I look forward to the debate tonight.
All right, thank you, candidates, for those opening statements. Now, in rotating order, I will call on you, and then you'll unmute yourself, and we're going to get to the question portion of this online forum. Everybody ready? I'm so excited. Okay, we are going to start. I'm going to read the question. Yep, 2 minutes per question. So I'm going to read the question. I'm going to tell you who's speaking, and then I'm going to read the question to you so that you know that this question is going to you first, so that you're prepared. So we are going to start question 1 with Susan Ackland. So I will read it, and then you can unmute yourself and answer it. It's a 2-part question, always my favorite in school. What are the highest priority issues or projects within your district that you intend to advocate for in the legislature? And why are they the highest priority for you? Susan?
My top two priorities are public safety right now and COVID-19 recovery. So when we talk about public safety, that was not always at the top of my list, but because of the recent things that have been going on with COVID-19, that has shot to the top because people are concerned. They want to know that they can live in a community where they're well protected, that criminals are held accountable, and that there is accountability for all people, whether you're the law enforcement agent or whether you're the criminal. So public safety would be my number 1 priority. We need to really settle that issue. We need to get that back on track because without peace, we really don't function very well. So the second part of my issue is the whole COVID-19 recovery. And COVID-19 recovery for this area, I think, has to do with small businesses and farming. Recently, I was in a meeting and they said 36% of the small businesses within the area had closed. And will those come back? I'm not sure. Hopefully some will with some of the benefits that they're receiving. But we need to make sure our small businesses are able to operate well. Without the small businesses in our small communities, we just won't prosper. So farming and small business, farming is also a small business. Well, it may not be that small, but anyway, farming and small businesses need to come back full. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see the sign, so I don't know. Am I done?
You still had 15 seconds. So if you want to keep going for 15 seconds, you can.
Okay, so
Oh, the joy of technology. You're still muted, Susan, so we'll give you those last 15 seconds to close out if you would like them.
Okay. So anyway, I would, for both of those issues, public safety, I would recommend full funding and maybe even raising funding in order to help them to come back, because those are the 2 most important areas that I can identify right now that we need to concentrate on.
Perfect. Jeff Brand, same question.
My highest priorities in 2021 and 2022 are going to be twofold. First, it's addressing COVID-19, and I'm wholly aware of the fact that there are 50 states right now with 50 different strategies for success. What I'm hopeful at is after this election, we'll have a national strategy in which all 50 states are working together to defeat the virus. Once the virus is defeated, then we can address what is left with our economy, and we can address the economic challenges that we're facing in Minnesota because of that. There is no doubt that we are going to be facing an economy of challenges for small businesses, for large businesses. Our economy is going to change a lot in the future just because of what we went through in the last 6 months. But I feel like from our standpoint, looking at the deficit and looking at our budget for next year, we're going to have to make some decisions about what we're going to do to fix the at least $3 to $4 billion deficit that we're facing together. Thank goodness that I've been at the legislature these last 2 years for me to actually be able to figure out how to work with folks in divided government, no less, to create a functioning state budget that works for a lot of Minnesotans. Not all Minnesotans, but for a lot of Minnesotans. COVID-19 has ripped off the Band-Aid that we were placing on a very, very deep wound in this country and also in this state. And there's no doubt that we will also have to work towards making an economy that works for everybody. I believe that's a shared value here in Minnesota. And for far too long, there have been people who have been marginalized, especially because of a few politicians who have favored power and wealth in that process. And so those are my highest priorities in 2021 and 2022.
We'll ask the same question of our Senate candidates, and we'll start with Nick Frentz. Nick, you're going to want to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you for that, Megan. First of all, this question is a little bit unfair because one of the top projects this area has emphasized in the last 40 years has been the completion of Highway 14, 4 lanes from Nicollet to New Ulm and all the way over to Rochester. And with the completion of that project, which Representative Brand and I were proud to be the chief authors of, the #1 project for this district is no longer on our list, but we're all very proud of that. And I'd like to point out that was a bipartisan effort that in the Senate had authors from both parties and authors that were here in the district. I guess I would say this. I reject the idea that the economy and COVID are separate issues. It's not just a matter of reopening. It's not just a matter of schools, it's all together. Like other countries, we need to get on top of the virus to promote kids back in school. We need to get on top of the virus to promote our businesses, and we need those jobs. A second priority, since you used the word project, Megan, is the bonding bill. We are still waiting to find out if our good friends across the aisle in the House will allow the $1.5 billion bonding bill to be passed. As many know, House Republicans blocked it during the special session. That's 28,000 jobs, and we need those jobs. As many people know, as far as projects goes, that includes the Riverbank Stabilization Project and other projects that are so important to the jobs in the immediate area and for working men and women. We have been pleased to see bonding projects pass, including ones that I chief authored for $70 million at the Security Hospital, the Phase 2 building for the Clinical Sciences, and many others. I'm also interested in clean energy, and I bet we get a chance to talk about that as we go forward. At the end of the day, if we can all work together, we'll have the best chance to get past the pandemic. And once we're past it, I'm very optimistic about our future as a district. Thank you.
Elizabeth Bangert, same question.
Say the top 2 priorities are individual freedom and financial freedom. As a small business owner who in the time of COVID understands the implications of owning a small business, grants are all fine and well, but it's an illusion of freedom. When you have grants that have strings attached and you're trying to navigate within how those dollars can be spent, that's not true freedom based on what I've heard from other folks who are also struggling. Along those same lines are individual freedoms. There are so many things that our country was founded on, and right now we're in a time of choosing. And with everything restricted for COVID right now, a lot of people are coming back to terms with what do I value? What happens if my rights are gone? Things of that nature. I believe that each individual is capable of making those decisions for themselves. And unless we have and preserve individual freedom and then financial freedom through things such as tax cuts and other things like our neighbor in South Dakota, when you give the power back to the people to choose and you do things and promote things that expand free market, like price transparency and things of that nature, it gives people their freedom back. But this is a very challenging time for small business owners. If it wasn't health insurance and losing that with Affordable Care Act, when that happened, I lost the ability to provide insurance for my employees. Then now it's COVID. And again, grants are all fine and well, but you have to use them the way that they're given. And to me, it just feels not very free. And so I'm for individual freedom and financial freedom and restoring that. That's all. I'll yield my time.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to question 2. And just a quick reminder to make sure that you have your screen set to view everyone so that you can make sure that you see the stop signs. Everybody is doing a great job staying within the time. Good work, candidates. Question 2, we're going to start with Nick Frentz. The question is, what strategies will you use to ensure your legislation is moved ahead at the Capitol, specifically if the legislature remains split between the two parties going forward? Nick Frentz, 2 minutes, and you're going to want to unmute. There you go.
I'm unmuted. Well, thanks, Megan. That's a question of style. And I'll tell you what my style is, and I'll tell you why I think it's a good one for our district and a good one for our state. You have to be bipartisan. Divided legislation is one of the most satisfying, and it also produces a result that causes the most people to respect it going forward. It's one thing to jam a piece of legislation down the throat of the minority party. It's quite another to say we have authors on both sides of the aisle. Remember that the parties go into caucus and talk among themselves. That's a very important moment for legislation to either rise or fall. And my strategy has been bipartisanship, and I've been very proud of it. I do think District 19 makes it easier to be bipartisan based on the demographics of our district. But when I first got to the Senate, I noticed that the senators were men and women who had an obvious penchant for being good to everybody in the Senate. They had relationships they were proud of. They were courteous. They didn't take any shots on the floor. And I noticed that they seemed to get a lot of things done. I think that's what our district would want the most. And I think it offers us the kind of success that our legislators present and past have been able to bring to the district. I think the second thing goes without saying. If you want things passed, you're going to have to do the work. It's no secret. I love serving in the Senate. We work sometimes 14, 15 hours a day. You have to drill down and understand what the issue is. In order to do that, you have to be willing to sit and read. You have to take meetings with people that you don't agree with. And you have to be willing to talk to legislators who may vote against you and understand why. If you don't do that, you're not going to have success. And I'm sorry to report that I've seen legislators who've taken the latter approach, and a lack of success is exactly what happens. It's no different than a lot of things in life, in the workplace or at school. But the difference is in those examples, it's not just that legislator that loses, it's the people in that legislator's district. Therefore, I think those are the strategies that are most likely to pay dividends. Thank you.
Elizabeth Bangert, same question.
It's actually a question that's something I've experienced because Senator Frentz was actually senator when we experienced the DHS situation at my small business. And he was very quick to help. I'm not afraid to say that. We're talking about bipartisanship. He got the Department of Human Services to tell me what my rights were. At the time, the Republicans actually controlled the House at that time. And then that was in 2018. And then in 2019, it switched. So at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to data and what the facts actually are and looking at it. And I learned a lot of things being in St. Paul about competing interests and making sure that we are looking not for who paid who in campaign finance or things of that nature behind the scenes, but actually looking at the legislation, how it relates to the Constitution, things of that nature. I will never forget being up there. I have 3,000 pages of data in this backpack, and I'm standing outside the Senate overlooking, and the doors open. And all of a sudden, all these people in suits with their jackets, and I learned all about jacketing up there for legislation. They just swarmed. And a guy walked past me and must have seen my face, and he's like, yeah, those are the paid lobbyists. Good luck to you. And my heart just sank. And so that's why I'm not accepting campaign finance at all or a salary. I'm declining all of that because I just want to represent the people and work together and get things accomplished. I mean, I was trying to hold down a job, not a paid lobbyist, just an average citizen trying to navigate things up there. And it was frustrating. Like, well, we can't do that because we're bartering with this. We're going to barter this freedom and we're going to give you that freedom. Like, enough with the bartering. Sometimes we over legislate and it's time to get back to basics. So my strategy would just be come in and have a cup of coffee and let's talk about this. Like, pull up a chair, let's discuss this and work it out. And let's get back to actually being about the people instead of, the swarm of things.
Thank you. We're gonna move on to the House candidates and we'll start with Jeff Brand. Jeff, can you hear us? There you go.
Yep, sorry, there was a little bit of lag there. I apologize. This is perhaps one of my favorite questions of the night so far, because I just want to point out to you how effective I've been in the last 2 years. I authored 57 pieces of legislation. The majority of them had co-authors in the House who were Republicans. That's because I would walk right into their office and I would say, look, I've got a piece of legislation. I think this is going to work for your district as well. Do you want to support it? Oh, and by the way, here's a copy of it. Can you look it over and see what we could do better? That's the kind of leadership that we need. We need people that can work together. And then I'd march over to the Senate and I'd start talking with candidates, or talk with senators across the street there. And the majority of my Senate companions were also Republicans as well. That's just how you work a bill. And I've worked with Karn Housley and Senator Ralph, and I've worked with Senator Dames, and I've worked with a whole bunch of different folks in the Senate because I know that's how you get legislation done. I really don't have time to throw incendiary bombs at my colleagues, because at the end of the day, that's not how you work to get things done. Again, to go back to what my campaign literature says, working better together. It's because when we could door knock back in 2018, people would say, Jeff, can you just work together up there? That's all we really want. I think that's a Minnesota value. I think that's what the people of this district expect, and that's what they've gotten so far. So in 2020, before COVID hit, I was actually invited by the co-chairs of the Civility Caucus in the House to join, specifically because they took note of what I did at the legislature, and they wanted me to be part of the Civility Caucus. And I think that says a lot about what we can do with the legislature. I think Senator Frentz is right. This particular district, I think, does bode well for bipartisanship. And I'm really glad to work with the folks across the river and the neighboring districts to get stuff done for all of us.
Thank you. Susan Ackland. Susan, unmute yourself, please. There you go. You're unmuted.
So I have to apologize. So I'm here too. So your question got cut off. Would you just repeat the thing so I know I'm answering? Can you repeat the question?
What strategies will you use to ensure your legislation is moved ahead at the Capitol, specifically if the legislature remains split between the two parties going forward?
Okay, so I got the gist of it. Thank you. So truly, I have felt it's encouraging to hear that you feel like you're working well together, because when I look at some of the legislation that's come through, it seems like so often it's really red and blue, that if one or two people come over to one side or the other, that's a big deal, but it's always the House against the Senate. I mean, just as a citizen, that's what I've been seeing. So, and that's one reason I'm running. It's like I'm a people person. I agree with the things that, Nick and Jeff and Elizabeth have all said. We want to work together. In my world, I don't feel like legislation should be a win-lose situation. Sometimes something is passed and it's great for somebody, but it's bad for another, or another area of the state or part of the state. And so the win-lose situation doesn't set well with me. So what I would like to see is bipartisan support. And I don't know if it's possible because I haven't been in the legislature yet, but I'd like to see bipartisan support before it even comes to the floor for a vote, so that people know we've really worked together to make something happen that will benefit everybody, that everybody will be a winner. Nobody will be a loser. So in my world as supervisor, that was part of my strength. That was a big part of my strength, is just being a people person, able to talk, able to evaluate, able to listen, and to make a compromise where compromises can be made. So I am in total agreement. If I could see bipartisan results most of the time, I'd be very happy. And I hope I can be part of that.
Thank you. We're going to move on to question 3, and we'll start with the House candidates. We'll start with Jeff Brand. This question was just in from the public. What is your stance on Black Lives Matter, and are you committed to condemning white supremacist groups and supporting people of color in southern Minnesota?
Just writing it down so I don't forget it. Thank you very much for the question. I think that's a really important question as we talk about the greater what we're facing in Minnesota with civil unrest right now and that sort of thing. Absolutely, I don't condone violent actions on either side. I don't think that white supremacists should get as much elevation as they have gotten in the last couple of days because of the president and the presidential candidate in this next election. I think it was perhaps the lowest point in the entire debate, and our nation is having a very deep conversation about what white supremacy means. And that's also something that we took action on in the House of Representatives this year. We actually declared racism a public safety crisis. And what that means is that we've actually conducted a subcommittee on racial justice in order for us to tackle the systems and the what we've allowed the legislature over the years to uphold a justice system that doesn't match what I think Minnesotans value, which is equality for all. For far too long, there's been a few politicians who have, they've marginalized people based off of how much money they have, where they come from, and what they look like. And I think Minnesotans want to build communities where everybody can be proud, where everybody can be respected, and where everybody can work together for the common good. That's what I believe when I think of the idea of America, and America in the future. And so, if it's a group of people who have come to the forum and they want to have a conversation with us about how we do that stuff, we have to have a lot of people at the table. That has to include everybody, and that also has to include law enforcement as well. I'm really happy to see that law enforcement was involved in July when we created some reforms in law enforcement and our criminal justice system, but it was not a silver bullet. We do have a long way to go in our conversation.
Susan Ackland, same question.
Unmute. Okay, thank you. So there again, I mean, so much of what Jeff said is absolutely true. So I think we need to start with our Minnesota values, and we have all come from somewhere else. We are all immigrants. We are all. I was made fun of when I moved up here because I had an Oklahoma accent. So that was just a small thing, but no matter where you're from or where you're going, there's going to be a mixture of people. And so I want to stand up for the values that Southern Minnesota have. And I agree that racism is a public crisis. And to understand that, we needed some of this awakening, and I'm thankful for it. And we need to each individualize our own, examine our own selves and see where we stand on that. I'm going to be a little more direct on the question. I think Jeff avoided the question about does he support Black Lives Matter? And I want to say, yes, I think Black Lives Matter. I have many Black friends and I love them. I don't appreciate all of the I don't agree with some of their tactics, and I don't agree that some of the things that have come out of that group have been destructive, and they've been disruptive, and they've been hard. It's led to rioting, and it's not all about Black Lives Matter. I understand that, but there's some basic premises in their organization that I do not consider to be in that, to hold the same values that all Minnesotans hold. So do I on the white supremacist? Absolutely. They, anybody that's radical and is creating chaos, that I would not support that. So
Thank you. We're going to move on to the Senate candidates, and we'll start with Elizabeth Bangert. Same question, 2 minutes. Elizabeth, you'll want to unmute yourself. There. Oh. Can you unmute her, Todd? Yep. Oh, she is frozen. What to do? There we go.
Okay, I missed all of that. I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Would you like me to
Okay.
reread the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. The joy of technology.
I'm like, Mom, Josh, get off the internet. I'm not on it. Okay.
This question just came in from the public. What is your stance on Black Lives Matter? And are you committed to condemning white supremacist groups and supporting people of color in southern Minnesota?
Okay. So racism in any form, I don't agree with. I actually am not from Minnesota originally. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. And can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. My screen is going everywhere. Okay. So diversity and things of that nature, when I moved to New Ulm from Chicago, it was shocking to me because I was used to so much diversity. Nothing against New Ulm when I say that, it was just a very different experience. But I just like white supremacy, which I would obviously not agree with, the tactics used by Black Lives Matter, I don't also agree with. Rioting and things of that nature is not peaceful protesting, and people have a right to live in safety and security. And I know that looks different for everyone. But also I think we need to look at things systemically. We have a problem, in my opinion, in America with looking at silos of things. We talk about one thing, but not the other. Like, for example, poverty and solving that, things of that nature. Those are all things that contribute to different situations like this, where people feel marginalized or like they can't ever win. And so in that regard, I feel like all of the voices need to come to the table, but we need to be looking at policies that promote more freedom and more opportunity for all people. That's all I have.
Thank you. Nick Frentz, same question.
Thanks very much, Megan. The question is, do I support Black Lives Matter? Here's a hint. There's a Black Lives Matter sign in my living room window. I admit my wife put it there, but I support Black Lives Matter. I don't support everything that's done by every member of Black Lives Matter, but I don't support everything every lawyer did, or for that matter, every school teacher, or every police officer, or every business owner. The spirit of what's going on here is that our nation is at a point of reckoning on race relations. We have a history of slavery, and the simple fact is we need to keep moving towards the letter and the spirit of the Constitution, which is all men are created equal. There's an undercurrent in this discussion about violence, and here's what I'd say. The greatest civil rights leader of my lifetime is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he was a nonviolent protester, and that means he did not preach breaking windows, setting fire to buildings, or causing personal property or damage. And yet he is remembered as the one who accomplished the most. I think there's a lesson in there for all of us. If you need further proof, look at the late John Lewis, one of the greatest congressmen of our era. He preached nonviolence to the point where he took a baton to the head more than once. And yet what happened is that let his message ring through. That's the kind of leadership we need. I'd also say there's not just a spiritual, there's not just a moral component, but there's an economic component. And I'd like to use the great city of Mankato and the region for an example. As many people know, the Mankato Diversity Council has over 200 members. Mankato is seen as a welcoming community. Mankato draws more students of color than other Min-State campuses. Our businesses have greater success. They have lower unemployment. And I'll tell you, I don't think those two things are a coincidence. Greater diversity, greater welcoming leads to greater prosperity. And it's not just shown here in the city of Mankato and greater Mankato growth. It's shown all across the country. And that's exactly where I stand on that. Thanks, Megan.
All right, we're going to move on to question number 4, and we will start with Elizabeth Bangert. The question is, how are you thinking about balancing the state budget and ensuring that we are not cutting needed services?
a great question. With everything going on with COVID related, that is a topic that many are discussing, what's going to be cut and who's going to be impacted. I think fundamentally, when we look at the size of government, government is huge in the state of Minnesota. I believe firmly in helping people up, but the problem is those often become permanent programs. I believe personally the better option would be to, since we're going to be facing this, look at what is actually an essential service. What would happen if we gave people more freedom? And I'll give you an example when you're looking at budgetary things and cuts. People, again, put things in silos. For example, childcare. Everyone wants to talk about affordable childcare. Well, why can't we talk about why people can't afford childcare? For a lot of families that I encounter, one of their entire salaries goes to pay for health insurance. So that's contributing to part of it. We have different things like mortgages, the cost of living, inflation, things of that nature. So when we're talking about balancing a budget, we need to be looking at what are the basics, what's truly essential, but also look at we need to zoom out, not look at individual silos, which honestly was one of my things I was most frustrated with going to the Capitol is I'd go and sit in one committee and they'd hear part of something about childcare, and then I'd go to the taxes and they'd talk about something else. And it seemed like until the omnibus bill happened, it was like, oh, hey, and then I'd meet lobbyists in the hallway and they're like, yeah, sorry, you're definitely not getting what you just spent 30 days up here for because that got traded for what I wanted in this giant omnibus bill. So that's super frustrating too. So when you look at a budget, I think we need to take a simpler approach, give the money back to the people, put it in the hands of the people, and then start asking, not why is health insurance so expensive, all these different silos. We need to look at a whole and say, why can't we afford childcare? Why can't we afford this? And get down to the root of the issue.
Thank you. Same question, Nick Friends.
Well, thanks. And this question should have a time allotment for each candidate of about 3.5 hours, but let's see if we can jam it into 2 minutes. First of all, for everybody's reminder, Minnesota requires a balanced budget. That's the best thing about our budgeting process, and it's also the toughest. We look to be sitting on about a $2.3 billion rainy day fund. That's a good thing. That's some smart budgeting in the past. But we're also looking at what sounds a lot like a $4 to $5 billion deficit going into the next biennium, remembering that we budget for 2 years. Whatever legislators are convened in January are going to have to answer some simple questions. Question number one, would you raise taxes? My answer is I wouldn't raise taxes on anybody that's a working man or woman at a time of recession. Number two, what are you going to cut? We're going to have to cut. The requirement of a balanced budget means that we'll have to make some very tough choices, and there's going to be some unhappy people. Here's an example. I mentioned I serve on the Legislative Audit Commission. It's a bipartisan group that does budget analysis. It's really cool. They are required by the governor to give an analysis of what if they had to cut 10% of their budget. Good idea, right? See what we can save. They gave the presentation to us members last Thursday, and it sounds like 9 to 10 of their roughly 30 staff members would be cut. By the way, those 9 to 10 people are attending this meeting, hearing that go on. Those are painful moments. Now, it's possible the federal government helps us out a little bit. I was saying to Representative Brand earlier today, if I were the federal government, I would consider it a good investment to put somewhere between $200 and $400 billion into the states to avoid a much bigger jolt to the economy, but I'm not in Washington, D.C., and that's up to them. Finally, what I would say is it's going to be fine. We're going to get through this. We have been through world wars. We've been through other pandemics, and we'll get through this, but it's going to take some tough choices, and it's going to take some maturity and some experience when people get up there. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our House candidates. Same question, and we'll start with Jeff Brand and Kat Coworker.
Yes, Kat Coworker showed up. It's wonderful. Thanks for the question. First, I need to point out something. Thanks for holding me accountable, Susie. Absolutely, Black Lives Matter. Just want to make that clear, so we're not questioning that in the future. As far as the economy and what we're going to do with the legislature, no doubt we're going to have some hard conversations. I would say it comes down to there's two philosophies. We can either do this surgically, or we could do surgery with a brick. I would rather be very strategic about what we do in cutting and what we look at in terms of revenue raisers in order to make it fair and equitable for everybody. I've always been very interested in creating a fair tax system, and Senator Frentz is absolutely right. to hit the working class families of Minnesota right now during a pandemic, that's really difficult, and I wouldn't want to do that. And so undoubtedly, we're going to have to look at some cuts, but it would be really nice if our federal government, who can borrow money and can print money, were to help states bail us out. And I don't think it's a red states or a blue states issue. I think it's a 50 states issue. If we're really in this together as a country, we have to really be in this together. And in Minnesota, we can't print money and we can't borrow money from other foreign organizations, foreign countries. And so we are going to have to look at our federal partners for help, just like we did for cities and counties. And we were able to get COVID money in June off to the cities and counties. And I think it's really important that in terms of looking at the future, when we rebuild this economy, we're going to have to rebuild this economy for everybody. And that means also we're going to have to look at how to make things more equitable at the state. Again, we're reviewing different systems and different pieces of legislation from the past. How is it adversely affecting people, and how can we make it impact people for the better?
Thank you. Susan Ackland, same question.
Mute. Thank you. Oh, good answers, everyone. I appreciate. As a first-time candidate and somebody who's not been in the House, I appreciate listening to your opinions and look at it. So, just from a novice point of view, my first thoughts are, and like Jeff said, we need to cut this surgically. But my first thought is there's been a lot of talk in the past of the waste and fraud that's been going on within our different agencies. So I think that would be the very first place to start. What are the essential services and how are they being operated? Are they being operated as efficiently as possible? If we start there, then we're not so likely to have to cut the services or cut services that are really needed. And cutting services is like the last thing we would want to do. However, I don't know if that would be possible. So I would at least look at the ways within the different organizations. Another thought had come to my mind, and not having dealt with budgets this large, and I'm the first to admit I have not dealt with this. In fact, I said to the Lord, Lord, did you know we were going to have this $4.5 billion deficit when I went to the House? I was prepared for, back when I started running, we had an excess. And so it's like that was going to be a happy day to work with. But nonetheless, when I think of small businesses, I think we need to get our small businesses up and running. The more small businesses you have, the more taxes you will create, the more taxes they'll pay. And so in order to create more small businesses, I really just wonder if maybe we could actually give small businesses a tax break to give them an incentive to grow, an incentive for entrepreneurs to develop new businesses. So more businesses, give them some sort of tax incentives to actually create these businesses and grow their businesses.
Thank you. We're going to move on to question 5, which is about healthcare, and we're going to start with Susan Ackland, so you can just stay unmuted. The question is, COVID-19 has exposed the deficiencies in our healthcare system generally, including mental health and care of the elderly. Care funds will run out soon. How might the legislature address these gaps in the short and long term?
So healthcare, having been in, well, two things. Having been a nurse for 40 years, healthcare is near and dear to my heart. Secondly, we have a funeral coming up on Monday to bury an uncle who was in a nursing home who died this week of COVID. So it's really painful. It's difficult. And when I looked at the situation my uncle was in, we got a call 2 weeks ago that 2 people in his nursing home, and this is in South Dakota, so it's not Minnesota, but 2 people in his nursing home had died from COVID, and he had tested positive, but he was doing okay. Within a week, he is dead, and 11 people in that nursing home are dead. So I feel like what we didn't do well at all is protect our seniors that are in these nursing homes. And once there is a COVID case in those homes, I feel like the people should have been moved to protect them. How that would happen exactly, I don't know. That would take a lot more study and a lot more thought put into that. But we needed to be prepared to protect those elderly people. From my point of view, the seniors going forward, with the population growth, the age expansion of all the baby boomers who are coming up, we're going to need a lot more long-term care, and we're going to really need to provide care for those seniors who will be in nursing homes going forward, and those will just be expanding. So I don't know if I answered the question, because now I forgot what the second part was. I'll give up. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, Jeff Brand.
It's really important for us to realize that when we go forward, we're going to have to look back eventually and see what we've done wrong and have a playbook ready for the next time. But right now, there is no playbook for us. What happened in 1918, it might as well have been in a different planet, because it definitely was a different time with less technology, less people, and challenging circumstances nonetheless. You know, recently when COVID-19 hit, Senator Fentz and I had to spring to action on a couple of different fronts. There were some outbreaks here locally. There's one in St. Peter, one in North Mankato. I personally worked with the Department of Health in order to get testing as quickly and rapidly as possible to ensure that spread of the virus was quelched. And then also at the Regional Treatment Center back in April, we all had a meeting together, and that was because employees were saying they didn't have masks, they didn't have sanitizer, and they didn't have PPE. In fact, I had a lot of nurses and a lot of doctors in Mankato at both Mayo Clinic and Mankato Clinic that were reaching out to me saying, Jeff, we need our mask allocation for April. We need our mask allocation for May. At the end of the day, that's ridiculous. We should make sure that our folks have all of the PPE that they need. It was a challenge for us to have testing on the ground for a while there as well. And so we have to have this stuff. And General Jensen from the National Guard in Minnesota also said, you know, looking at this differently, I'm going to have a warehouse full of stuff available to us at a moment's notice, because they got cleaned out. They didn't have anything left. They didn't have any PPE because they were sharing it with hospitals and clinics across our state, because that's what they do. When they need to help, they help. But they didn't have the resources because we relied too much on what happened at the national level. We're just finding out now that in South Dakota, we had some patients that were transferred to Minnesota. They need to reevaluate their policies, just like Smile. But long term, we are going to have to make some funding issues available.
Now we'll move on to our Senate candidates. Same question, and we'll start with Elizabeth Bangert.
Can you repeat that? Sorry, I just want to make sure I address your question.
COVID-19 has exposed the deficiencies in our healthcare system generally, including mental health and care of the elderly. Care funds will run out soon. How might the legislature address these gaps in the short and long term?
Perfect, thank you. So with everything going on, much like Representative Brand says, this is new uncharted territory. None of us were alive in 1918 unless I missed something. So none of us have lived through anything like this. And obviously loss of life is not something that should be shoved to the side. At the same time, when you speak of mental health, like for example, I have a good friend who lost 2 cousins to suicide during this time because of all of the mental health ramifications and implications of COVID, when people start losing jobs and they start to lose a sense of self-worth and things of that nature. But when we're talking about the health system overall, America doesn't do health care, we do sick care. We've never, in my opinion, looked upstream to say, hey, this is how you build a healthy immune system. This is how you eat differently or you change your diet or things of that nature. Again, to look at a silo system, preventative health care or things of that nature, especially as the baby boomers and others reach that age, Preventative is not, this is a diagnostic test that you can take and find out you have breast cancer. That's not preventative. Preventative is how do you avoid getting breast cancer, or what is causing breast cancer, or things of that nature. Are there environmental things? Yes, I said that as a Republican. Are there environmental things that are impacting that? And so to me, again, it's a zoom out approach, not to keep like beating a dead horse here, so to speak, but it's a zoom out approach. Zoom out and say, look at all these different facets. When we talk about mental health, why do we have mental health issues? Why are all of those things going on? And of course, with COVID, a lot of that is people go to work, then they don't have a job. How am I going to feed my family? How am I going to do this? Where's my sense of worth anymore if I can't go to work, or if I'm supposed to provide for my family and I just lost my small business? As a small business owner, those are things I struggled with. When the bank calls you and you're like, I don't know what to tell you. So at the end of the day, I think we need to work together, but I think we need to start looking upstream and stop looking downstream at everything floating down.
Nick Frentz, same question.
Thank you. And I see two parts to this question. First of all, each of the candidates has mentioned things that were already structurally in need of improvement before COVID, and I think those are good points. A good example would be mental health. But many people don't know this, but it's a sign of a larger problem. Minnesota schools have one of the lowest counselor to pupil ratios in the nation. We're at 1 to about every 450 students now, and that's after we improved it. Mental health has costs well beyond the quality of life of the student. It has costs that last a lifetime sometimes, and treating it earlier is better. COVID also exposed some of the deficiencies in caring for the elderly, and I think those are well documented, and they're also unfortunate. One of the things I wish the government would admit is we didn't know everything at the beginning. That's not always bad. One of my favorite examples is that we now know that outdoor activities are a little safer than we thought. That's a good thing. But we did not know that. And we went into this maybe a little underprepared, and maybe could have used a little more leadership at the federal level, but we know more. And I think one of the things I'm encouraged by is the way Minnesotans are figuring out ways to do the things they need to do, like go to work and go to school and still be safe enough. We'll never be completely safe, but we weren't completely safe before COVID. I can't resist taking a moment to talk about the healthcare. I think, Megan, you said and beyond. And I would say we have to have a reckoning as a nation about what we want for healthcare. We have a system where it's largely available, but not always. We're doing things we couldn't do 50 years ago. We're saving people that would have never survived, but it costs a fortune. Canada, as an example, makes decisions about essential benefits that we don't make. A 76-year-old with cancer in Canada is often receiving no treatment. Here, it might be $500,000. Until the public is ready to have a real look at change with a consensus, we won't be able to do it. And I support a public option to allow us to make that move, allow comparison, and see what the people think. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We're going to switch it up for these next two questions. It's time for a lightning round. So this means that I will ask you a question and candidates will either respond with yes, no, or uncommitted. These are your only choices. If you continue to go on, we will mute you because that is the only choice you have, yes, no, or uncommitted. These will be two lightning round questions. We're going to start the lightning round with Nick Frentz for question number 6. Are you ready, candidates? You will get the same question.
So it's yes, no, or uncommitted.
Yes, no, or uncommitted.
Okay. Go ahead.
These are only choices.
I'll try to remember the choices.
That's good. And if you answer incorrectly, that's on you. You guys are the ones running for office, not me. I'm just moderating this thing. Do you support a full flavor prohibition on tobacco-related products? Nick Frentz.
Yes.
Elizabeth Bangert.
Uncommitted.
Susan Ackland.
Uncommitted.
Jeff Brand.
Yes.
All right. Question number 7 in the lightning round, and we're going to start with Jeff Brand. Yes, no, or uncommitted. Do you support increased funding for tobacco prevention?
Yes.
Susan Ackland.
Yes.
Nick Frentz.
Hell yes.
Elizabeth Bangert.
No.
All right, this concludes our lightning round. Good job, candidates. We're going to move back into the normal format. Well, I will ask you a question and you will have 2 minutes to answer. But wasn't that fun? Okay, here we go. Question number 7. This is an agriculture question. Oh, excuse me, this is question number 8. I got distracted because the lightning round was so fast. All right. What measures would you support to stabilize our state's agricultural economy and to provide opportunities for this and the next generation of family farms? We'll start with Elizabeth Bangert.
So farming is the lesser of my expertise areas, and I'm comfortable saying that because I don't think everyone is an expert on everything, and I'm not going to pretend to be. But I will be honest with you. I'm a person who enjoys organic food, and small farmers like that. And being a member of the food co-op in St. Peter and learning about different struggles that they may have in comparison to maybe larger commercial farms or things of that nature, as well as just the cost difference and different struggles. I think there are a lot of different things that can be looked at, including regulations and the ability to sell product or how you sell product, like direct to consumer, things of that nature, what you are and are not able to sell. And so in that regard, again, more freedom would be beneficial. Not everyone farms the same way. Not everyone has the same type of farm. And that is something that's near and dear to me, just because, again, that's a personal choice. But learning and watching different farms in the area of different varieties, there has to be a different approach. So I guess relating to farming, I hope that answers the question, and I definitely can learn more. I've been, my husband's family, they're farmers down by Albert Lea, and I've learned a lot in that area, but again, that's commercial farming, and I'm not a farmer by trade. I am a childcare provider, but I'm always willing to learn more. And again, that's where come on in and have a cup of coffee and let's discuss this, because claiming to be an expert on everything is not what I'm going to do.
All right, same question, Nick Frentz.
Well, I didn't grow up on a farm either, but I do love it. I think it's got some things that are really just specific to Minnesota. And I think it's also driving about 22 billion of the state's economy. So farmers and farm families make up 4% of our population, and they are driving businesses across southern Minnesota and across the state. And whether you love farming or not, you better recognize that. That includes the simple fact, which I'm proud of, that Mankato is the #1 soybean processing city in the country. Think about that for a minute. As we all know, some of these issues are federal issues. I'm especially disappointed in how trade has gone the last 4 years, but I'll spare that for some other people to debate. We are looking at commodity prices in some areas that are lower than they were 4 years ago. And I'm not fully encouraged about the way that's going. But again, that's for our friends in Washington, D.C. There are things we can do at the state level. Number one, we can look at rural broadband as a necessity, just like electrification was in the 1930s. Number two, we can look at a buffer strip tax credit. Drives me crazy that we told farmers to take that land out of production and we still tax them like they're growing corn and soybeans on it. Number three, we have to continue to move to direct farm to schools, farm to co-ops, and farm to consumer sales. That's a big plus. That eliminates the middleman and helps support the price for the farmer. Number four, and if I was in Washington, D.C., this might be the #1 thing I would yell about, we have got to continue to support ethanol. I'm a clean energy advocate. I see us moving to electrification, but ethanol is cleaner burning and it supports the price of corn. Some of our farmers in Nicollet County estimate it's 60 cents a bushel. We have to continue to use that as a transition and to support the price. And I think my final move, if I was king for a day, would be to pass a law that everyone in the Twin Cities has to visit a Nicollet County farm for a day, ride a tractor, see a buffer strip. If we had a little more understanding, I think it would go a long ways. Thanks.
All right, we'll move on to our House candidates and we'll start with Jeff Brand. Same question.
I'm unmuted, so you can hear me good. So I just jotted down a couple of notes here. Senator Frentz is absolutely right when he talks about trade. It's a big disappointment, but also it's the ethanol waivers. That is a huge disappointment when 200-mile radius around Mankato is 1/4 of the world's ethanol is produced. So I think it's really important for us to look at some of the federal work and then also find partners at the federal level that we can work with to create stronger farm economy. Now, as far as the next generation of farmers are more interested in taking out loans. They're also more interested in adapting to new technology. We can't have these new combines that are going to be harvesting corn. We can't have these new pieces of technology that can pinpoint precision with the mapping and the GIS mapping of the farm fields, where the inputs go to make more strategic inputs and cost savings. We need broadband for that. And we can't do that if we can't connect to the farm to the tractor. Nothing's working. The face of farming has changed. It used to be Ole and Lena that were the farm families here in Minnesota, but that is changing. I've toured a Mung farm by Hastings, and I've seen their impact and their potential impact in the farmers markets in St. Paul and Minneapolis. We need to focus on more urban agriculture because, again, the face of agriculture is changing. We also, I think, need to focus more on the farm to school, which is the first year we allocated was 2019 money where the farmer produces the food and it goes right to the school. That's really tremendous. We also need to focus more on farm to table as well as a way to generate more support for local foods. River Rock Coffee here in St. Peter is a great opportunity for us because they locally collect a lot of different organic products, and they create some really delicious things from it. And it's you knowing the farmer and the farmer knowing you, and that money exchanges hands 7 times locally, and that's important to us.
All right, Susan Ackland.
Thank you. So my grandparents were wheat farmers in Oklahoma. The happiest days of my life were spent on their farm with them. And so I do have an affinity for the land and for the farmers. And I'm getting most of my information directly from the farmers. And just to tag on to some of the things that have been mentioned, same thing, you mentioned the ethanol. I talked to one farmer who farmed a lot of land, and I asked him, how much of your crop do you actually use into producing ethanol? I'm thinking maybe it's 25% or 30. I didn't know. He said his crop was 80% ethanol, and he said if we didn't have the ethanol, they would go bankrupt. And so it's a huge problem. So then you may ask a question later, about clean energy, but that would affect our farmers drastically. So the farmers took a big hit recently, and it's starting to come back with all the pork and the COVID, the shutdown of the manufacturing plants. I've heard the troubles that the farmers are having with the buffer zones and the taxes, and that is being rectified some degree. But what I see, it's these regulations that come down or these changes that are made without taking the farmer into account. So I think we have to definitely pull the farmer in on anything that's going to affect them, because if we lose our farms, we've lost how much of Minnesota is in farming. I don't know for sure, but anyway, so the regulations are a big thing. And one of the other issues that has been brought to my attention several times is the whole issue of passing the family farm down to the children. And there's a problem there because of the inheritance tax, or some people call it the death tax.
Thank you, candidates. We're going to move on to question number 9. What do you see as our most pressing environmental issue in South Central Minnesota? And we'll start with Jeff Brandt.
I think that we all, I believe, will agree that Minnesotans have a shared value, and that we all should have a climate where we can, do the things we want to do without having interruption. And I think that, having a cleaner energy future along with climate justice is really important. And so, when we talk about our economic strategy for success, we do not have coal deposits, we do not have oil wells, and we don't have any natural gas deposits in the state. But what we have a lot of is sun and wind. And I believe the new economy in Minnesota is going to be one in which we already have 60,000 new jobs in Minnesota with our clean energy economy. And those are technicians and installers and people who who haul these things back and forth from the manufacturer plants, from the shipyards. And I think it's really important that we embrace this. We do need to have an energy future. I'm really strongly supportive of the 100% renewable by 2050 bill, which Senator Frentz was actually the author in the Senate, and I was a co-author on in the House. I think it moves our state forward. And so I think that's the most pressing issue that we have in South Central Minnesota when it comes to our environment. But there are other things too. There's no doubt that we have siltation and water issues on the landscape. I authored a bill this year that would actually store water on the landscape to do two things. First is to stop or slow down the runoff to our rivers to prevent erosion of our Minnesota river bluffs, but also to recharge our aquifers. We don't know a lot about our aquifers, but we draw a lot of water from those aquifers. It'd be really nice if we had a strategy to make that sustainable, so that way we can have our children and our children's children use those aquifers into the future.
Elizabeth Bangert, same question.
This one's a personal one for me. My business is actually located on the edge of a quarry, and I have a CUP, conditional use permit, on 3rd Ave. It's been a very interesting journey. I've had to learn all about all sorts of things. You know, people say state agencies are there to help you, but yet you come to find out, hey, they can just discharge a ton of water and they'll just pretend it didn't happen. And without going into too much detail about that, because quite frankly, I really can't, water quality and what happens in the water is very important to me. We drink that water, we consume that water. Your skin is the largest organ on your body. And if you're bathing in that water and people are being impacted by that, then that's a problem. There's neurological disorders, all sorts of things come from water poisoning situations. I have a really good friend whose children were poisoned with a 3M water spill or water situation. And this isn't a red or blue issue. And I'm going to be very candid about that. Part of the reason that I'm running for office is because I'm just so exhausted. I'm so exhausted with people saying, you can't say that because you're a Republican, or you can't talk about that because that's something the Democrats talk about, or vice versa. Why can't we all just care whether or not people are being poisoned by water? And why can't we have a reasonable conversation? If we're going to talk about things like mining or other things like that and water quality, I want to ensure that we actually have a system in place that, sure, we obviously need to mine things, but we also need to make sure that it's being done in a manner, and I don't have to read through a 400-page report to find out why my aquifer was drained so far that they had to lower the pump over 50 feet because whoopsie daisies. So these are real problems and real situations. And at the end of the day, there are so many things that we just forget the party lines. Like, I'm literally over it. I'm going to be blunt with you. I'm over it. Come together, work on restoring our God-given rights. And when it comes to water quality, that is very important to me.
Nick Frentz, same question.
Thank you. And in addition to this being another question, which probably requires about a half an hour per candidate, it may be the question that we agree on the most as a group. I see two issues in the question, Megan. I see water quality, and then I see the much larger and pressing issue of climate change. First, on water quality, I could not agree more with those that say water quality is a life and death issue. We have the Minnesota River, which has too much nutrient. That's not really any one person's fault, but it needs addressing. And yet on the other side of that are businesses, quarries, farms that want less restrictive discharge permits and less regulatory environment. And I think the sweet spot is somewhere in between there. My answer on the clean water part of it is we cannot sacrifice clean water. We don't have life without it. And I'm sorry for the short-term cost of that. But speaking of short-term cost, and Representative Brand touched on this, the climate change issue is not going anywhere, folks. I'm proud to be the chair of the Senate Clean Energy and Climate Caucus. And if there was one email I received more than in all the 100 to 200 emails we get a day at the Senate, it's on clean energy. We're going to have to make some very serious decisions. We're watching farmers being impacted by weather events. We're watching wildfires. We're watching hurricanes. And there's two things that bother me about that. The first thing is, this is exactly what some people said was going to happen 20 years ago, when many of us humans said, oh, it's a hoax or it's not going to work. So we just kept right on putting carbons into the air. But I think the second one strikes closer to home for me the older I get. The U.S. is not exactly a leader in this area. We withdrew from the Paris Climate Accords. We're 4% of the population putting out 15% of the carbon. And while we are not the only polluter, I'm starting to get the strong feeling that a lot of our former allies are not that thrilled with us. And as the younger generation, for whom climate change is no laughing matter, starts getting into the levers of power, I'm worried that we'll look back and say we missed a golden opportunity. Looking forward to legislation in that event, and I'm proud to be the governor's chief author of the 100% bill. Thank you.
Susan Ackland.
So, just a little slightly different take on this too. So my husband and I actually looked into putting solar panels on our house, thinking that would be a good thing. And looking into that, we want to be part of the solution here. We want to be part of the clean energy. It's very expensive. It was not going to pay off for us. It didn't lower our cost at all. And we looked into several options, and none of them worked for us. So I don't think we're really there with the solar yet to feel like that's like 10 years or 15 years we're going to be there. Because honestly, we were ready to do that if that would work, but it didn't work for us as personally. So when I look at this, I look at it like I'm all about balance. I'm all about, what, we have to weigh this out. We feel like we're in this press to get to the end point so quickly. But on the other hand, I'm not sure. What I hear is that solar energy and wind energy, they're unreliable. So we're going to have some balance there using natural gas on our farms for our equipment, etc. They're not going to be able to run their equipment that they have now on solar or wind energy. That's what I've been told. I don't know that from my own personal opinion, but just this is what I've been told. And so the farmers that I've talked to, they are actually using some wind and some solar. But I think we're going to have some balance there, that we will need some of both. And we have it. We have the natural resources, and I'm for using them. The other thing too is what was I going to say? Anyway, the farmers are important when we're looking at this in a big term. I just think we need to look at it broadly, and I think we need to not.
Thank you. This will be our last question of the night until we move to closing remarks. So make your responses good. All right, question number 10. The Mankato Free Press reported that as many as 17% of Nicollet, LeSueur, and Blue Earth households don't have access to appropriate broadband internet. This is especially problematic for students at any level learning from home or individuals working from home. What would you as a legislator do to make broadband accessible in the near term and long term? And we'll start with Susan Ackland.
Okay, so recently I had a conversation with a businessman and talking to me about the importance of broadband for everybody, and especially extending out into the rural areas, to have it available for students, especially in this time of distance learning, is super important. The problem with it is in our area is the cost of it. So getting the line, so what they call the last mile, cost about $46,000, I've been told, to do that last piece from the main line to your house, $46,000. So the cost of it is one thing that's prohibiting moving that forward, plus just the logistics of implementing that. The thought that what I've been hearing from my constituents is partly is we don't feel like maybe the technology is quite there yet to make this happen more reasonably for everyone. The farmers that we were on a farm recently, they had we had good Wi-Fi at their house, but you're right, in order to run all this equipment and do all the things, the broadband is essential. I'm just not sure economically how we would make that happen.
Jeff Brand.
So in Minnesota, we have an Office of Broadband. We're one of the few states in the country that actually have that. We also have a commitment by 2026 to be fully integrated from border to border in Minnesota. This year, unfortunately, we weren't able to do more investments in broadband, but last year we were able to invest some money. But it's going to take a lot more to get us to 2026 where we need to be, where everybody's connected. For a lot of reasons, it's really important if it's a student who has to go to the library to upload their homework assignment versus actually do it in their own home, or to research their homework for that matter, to again, going back to a young farmer who wants to make the commitment to expend the money to get a loan, to get a tractor with the new GPS technology for the inputs and that sort of thing. It's going to take a lot of work. I wrote a letter of support very recently for Nuvera in the west end of Nicollet County, because they're looking at a broadband project in Minnesota and Nicollet County themselves. And so if they get the grant, then those folks would be connected finally. All Minnesotans deserve connected communities. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about transportation or farms, or again, we're going back to communities for broadband internet. And so if you look at the map, if you go west of St. Peter, if you go west of Nicollet, if you go east of St. Peter, there's no broadband internet service. Colleagues in the House have told us that the best thing we could do for rural Minnesota is to get HughesNet. But, you know, colleagues like Rob Ackland have pointed out that HughesNet is not reliable, just like satellite is not reliable for folks in inclement weather. And if you've got a business in rural Minnesota and you're counting on dial-up internet service for your business, it's just not going to work. How do we find broadband internet service in all corners of our state? That's something I'm committed to, and I'm looking forward to talking about that again.
Nick Frentz.
Well, this is a great question, and this is something that both Representative Brand and I have worked hard on. I was proud this last session to be the chief negotiator for the DFL Senate on the rural broadband bill, and it was a shame that got shot down. Just briefly, that was a $27 million bill that had money for telemedicine, which I think will be a legacy of COVID-19, that will have more medicine provided over the internet, and also had distance learning. One of the things that's always driven me crazy, because I consider myself a bit of a cheerleader for Southern Minnesota and certainly for this area, is to tell a kid he has to go to the fast food parking lot to do his homework, or to tell a student that she has to go somewhere else than her house to get her homework done. What kind of message does that send to our students? We wonder why we have trouble luring families down here, and that's Exhibit A. Of course, it's expensive. And by the way, I'm sensitive to the tech arguments about the coaxial cable being the most expensive, but the Office of Broadband has their position, and it's clear. Coaxial is the gold standard. It does cost more money, but it doesn't have the brownouts and blackouts and doesn't fade or make your image on your Zoom call go. What we need to do is acknowledge that this is a priority similar to with the electrification of America in the 1930s. And I used to live with my grandma on Kearney Street, and she would talk about how they argued, well, should we electrify the farms? Won't this cost money? Isn't this expensive? And now, of course, America can't imagine having rural America without electricity. And it will be the same, I promise you, with rural internet. And not only that, but the very name of the grants that we have in Minnesota are the border-to-border grants. And not only am I glad to be part of the $40 million that we already put into it, but I'll be right back up there with you, Representative Brand, fighting for it this next special session and any other time we can get it. It's one of the easiest, most low-hanging fruit things we can do to say that we are really all in it together. And rural Minnesota and those families will thank us. Thank you.
Elizabeth Bangert.
I would agree with everyone else that broadband is absolutely important. I mean, even again, my business, the internet goes in and out, and I have school agers there trying to connect to do their homework, and it's hard, it's challenging sometimes. But what I want to encourage people to do is, it's not that I'm opposed to issues, because I want broadband, right? You want these things for people. It goes back to the costs. Minnesota has a budget transparency website where you can go in and see, you can literally look at the checkbook of the state of Minnesota, and you can see where the money is going. And oftentimes there's middle people or there's other people in between. And if you take that out, or you take the contracts out, or things of that nature that are just exorbitant, and you get back to the basics, similar to like the farmer direct type method with farming and food supply, then it's a lot more simple. The problem that I have is business is a government, whether or not people want to admit, or government is a business, whether or not people want to admit that, right? It's the same concept, it's the same setup. I don't have time to explain all of that right now. Perhaps we should look at CAFR's comprehensive annual financial reports instead of budgets, which are the actual things spent within a municipality and things of that nature. It's the cost, and it's making sure that we can get things done at a reasonable cost without finding out that someone stood to gain a lot of money and had a lobbyist up there doing who knows what to get that. So I'm not opposed to having conversations, but I want to make sure they're transparent and we talk about the cost and we know exactly where that money is going. You should check out that website.
All right, candidates, we are going to close this forum with your closing statements. You will have 1.5 minutes for your closing statements to bring it home as your final words for the night. And we are going to start in reverse order of how we opened to make sure that it's all equitable and fair over here. So we will start with our House candidates, and we'll start with Jeff Brand.
Thank you very much to the League for all of the work that you did today to provide a good forum for us to have our voters take a look at tonight. Thanks to everyone for being in my living room to talk about all of these important issues. You know, I just wanted to, I guess, in my final seconds here, to point out that I'm rural raised. I raised in Highland Township on a dairy in central Minnesota. And I also am proud to serve rural Minnesota. I'm tested, I'm trusted, and obviously, as we talked about tonight, we've gotten results at the legislature, and I'm focused on working better together, as my slogan and my campaign have alluded to. I think that we all deserve a fair shake from our government, an economy that works for us all, a government that's by the people and for the people, and a government where we can actually get the care we deserve in Minnesota. I'm proud to be your partner in St. Paul. I know especially this last year was a bit difficult for us in the legislature to do face-to-face things, but we've navigated a way to do a lot of these things virtually like we're doing tonight. And I'm looking forward to having more conversations with my constituents here. And I would ask for you to vote for me on or before November 3rd. Thank you very much.
Susan Ackland.
So it has been a good evening. Thank you, all the candidates. And I just go back to last September when I was looking for something meaningful and something I was really passionate about. And politics dropped into my lap, more or less, but actually, truly, it was a God calling me to do this, to stand up and to speak up for the values of Southern Minnesota. And so as I move forward, I realized it's a very steep learning curve, and I will admit that. Totally different from what I've been doing for the last 40 years of my life. And yet I'm up to the challenge. The way I learn is by listening and talking to people. And so regardless of what your profession is in my district, whether you're a businessman, a farmer, a school teacher, whatever it is, if I'm a representative, I need to hear from you. I need to know what you're thinking. I need to know your concerns. I need to know your values. I need to know what are the wins for you? What would make your life better? And that is who I am. Listening, evaluating, working on legislation. And when I am in St. Paul, my only goal is to represent 19A. So often
We'll move on to Senate candidates, and we'll start with Nick Frentz.
You're starting with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. First of all, thanks to the League of Women Voters, thanks to my fellow candidates. It's no secret, I think this is just a blast. I'm extremely proud to serve the district, partly because I think it's such a great example for our state, and partly because it's just so cool to be up there. I'm asking you to send me back to St. Paul to serve another term as a senator. I'm a proud assistant minority leader, and if things go the way I hope they do, I'll be in the majority coming up, and I'll be proud to work with whichever representatives are there in the House for the two halves of the district. We've talked about a lot of important issues here, but what it comes down to is what is best for the people in this district and what is best for the state. We're asking for the kind of tone that actually I think we've had on this call. We need bipartisanship. We need people to work together. We need to put the people in our district above our party. I'm not embarrassed to say I think I've done that. I told you the groups that have endorsed me for this race. I'm proud of every one of them. And I'm proud that not every Democrat gets some of those endorsements. And I've worked very hard to build the relationships. At the end of the day, the success that you have at the Capitol often comes down to who you are, who you represent, and how you've treated people in the past. And while we have done great things in this area and in this district, and while I am incredibly proud of it, it probably bugs people that I get so proud of it. I think that's what's necessary. I want to end with a quote from a friend of mine I made a relationship with, Governor Tim Walz. Senator Frentz is one of the most effective, bipartisan, and knowledgeable members we have in the entire state legislature. And on that note, I'd just like to say thanks very much and have a great night.
Elizabeth Bangert.
Again, thank you, everyone. I agree with everyone else's sentiments that it's been a great evening. I'm just an average citizen. I'm a patriot who wants to ensure that our God-given rights are defended and protected. And at the end of the day, even if I don't win, it was never about that for me. Of course, I'd obviously love to be in St. Paul, but at the end of the day, it was about showing that an average person can do this. You don't have to take campaign finance. You don't have to do any of those things. You can just be yourself. You can learn. I had to learn about the jacketing process for bills, all of those different things. I'm a hard worker. I held down a business while compiling 3,000 pages of public data. I am not afraid to learn. I didn't even know what a CAFR was when someone told me, come to find out it's an acronym. I'm not afraid of hard work and I'm not afraid to learn. But ultimately, this isn't about me. It's about you. It's about our rights. And it's about ensuring that we have the freedoms that this country was founded on. And so I'm asking for your vote to go up there and to keep Minnesota what it's truly about, the wonderful people here, by protecting our rights for such a time as this.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes our forum. If you did not get your question answered and you were just sitting on the edge of your seat in your house while you're watching this, we encourage you to contact your candidates at any time. That is part of their job to better serve you. I want to say a huge thank you to the League of Women Voters of St. Peter for hosting this forum in partnership with the St. Peter Herald and the Chamber of Commerce. And in the background, who you cannot see, is Todd the Technology Man, who is working overtime voluntarily with the City of St. Peter to help us out and make sure that we didn't have any technological glitches tonight. And if I could give him a round of applause, I sure as heck would. There it is. So I also want to remind everybody who's watching to vote, 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 vote. Did you hear that? Vote. If you did not know, the League of Women Voters absolutely supports free and fair voting. We don't care who you vote for. We just hope that you're making an informed choice and you get your butt to the polls. And if you're doing it in person, remember to mask up and head out on November 3rd. You can also vote at any time at your county election office all the way up until November 2nd in this great, great state of Minnesota. If you're voting absentee, as soon as you know your choices, get that stamp on there, lick it twice, seal it good, and send it off. Thanks everybody for watching, and we hope that you vote. All right, nice job, everybody.